I would like, if I may, to take you on a strange journey.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Real Estate Realities with the Rebel Broker. My name's Robert Whitelaw, and I am the Rebel Broker. Licensed real estate broker in the state of California. Member of the National Association of Realtors. But please don't hold that against me. Here we are once again. Today is Thursday, July 21st, 2016. Pushing through another week. Hopefully everyone is getting a lot of things done this week, moving forward with your goals, hopefully achieving a lot. I'm really hoping that some of the comments I made yesterday come true in terms of the market slowing down a little bit. I'm getting tired of having multiple offers come in on properties I want to try and buy. But anyway, just still plugging away, seeing what comes online. I do get that feeling that we're going to see some slowdowns coming up for this winter. I hope you all are doing well. As always, I encourage you to reach out to me through the website at www.therebelbroker.com. You can send any ideas, suggestions, observations, or questions to me via the site. Just click on the Contact the Rebel Broker link in the upper right-hand corner. We've also got the audience survey. It's to kind of get the demographics of who makes up my audience settled. It's just a few questions. If you click the red button at the very tippy top of the website, it says, take this survey to help the show. That would be a great help to me, and I deeply appreciate you taking the time out to do that. And also, go ahead and take a minute to look at this week's poll. The question this week is whether or not you want to see me doing one show a week or one show at certain intervals, or intermittently disperse a show that is not real estate, an off-topic show. We'll see. I took a look at what the numbers are doing today in terms of what folks are voting on. I'd love to get a few more folks expressing their opinion, so please head on over and check that out. You can find that in the show notes of any of the more recent shows. So today's show is obviously the best one to go with. And click on the See More button when you look at a post on the website for the show, and it'll give you a view that shows more information, links to the articles discussed in the show. Plus, it'll show the poll itself, and you can participate in it right there and give your opinion. So I'd appreciate you taking the time out to do that. And then once we have all that data, we'll sit down and figure out what we want to do moving forward in terms of possibly offering other topics on the show. We'll see. I've already expressed my opinion on this. I'm not really on board with it, I guess. So I guess I should just run my own show and do what I want and just do the show on real estate. But it seems odd to have a show not about real estate where the name of the show is Real Estate Realities. But enough of you have asked that I thought it would be good to throw that topic out there and see what other members of the audience have to say. We're going to talk about an interesting topic tonight. I guess it's not so much interesting as it is frustrating. And it relates really to sort of twisting lending practices, interpretations of them into such a way as to imply that minority communities are being mistreated, I guess, in terms of lending practices. And there was a report that came out from the NCRC that supposedly shows racial and income disparities in lending in St. Louis, Milwaukee, and it's the National Community Reinvestment Coalition. And if you go and you look, most of the groups that are involved with these folks, the National Community Reinvestment Coalition, are absolutely about. They say they are, but if you look at their history, and they even name themselves after the Community Reinvestment Act of the early 70s, which was a bad thing. It's about pushing folks to make loans that are less than wise. So you have to kind of take that from the front end. And I've looked through their study, and I've looked through this article, which I'll obviously have a link to in the show. But I really want to talk about, is there a racial discrimination element to lending money? which results in which, right? What comes first? It's sort of a chicken and an egg kind of a thing. Are we really living in, and I have a hard time believing this, maybe just because where I live, I just don't see this as a thing. I've brought this up before. This has been a topic that's come up several times over the nearly, good Lord, over the almost 10 years I've been doing the show. And back when I used to get callers calling in live, when I was doing the live show, I, on a couple of occasions, actually got lenders calling in to chat about this one and saying, you're absolutely right, that this does not happen, and that the folks who pull this chain to try and stop the train and divert funds are not looking at the reality of lending on the ground. And you can absolutely disagree with me, and I'm totally up for you explaining where I'm wrong, and there may be regions where this is happening. But even with this study, which I'm guessing is probably trying to make the absolute best case possible, it is my opinion that they are absolutely misleading you with what they're claiming are these indisputable results of this research. So let's kind of get into it. Let's take the gloves off, roll up the sleeves, and let's dig deep into this one. According to the NCRC study, the racial composition of a neighborhood is a strong predictor of mortgage activity in St. Louis and Milwaukee. Okay. There's one little phrase I want to try to throw out there before we move forward. Correlation is not causation. In other words, to kind of put it into a really basic construct, if someone moves in 2 doors down from you, and that same day they move in, you lose your job, you didn't lose your job because that person moved in 2 doors down. Right? Just because the fact that happened the same day you lost your job doesn't mean one caused the other. That's the idea, that just because something correlates, meaning it happens at the same time or operates in the same space or whatever, doesn't mean one caused the other necessarily, right? You need other things to indicate the causality of it, right? So that's kind of, you have to have a little bit more of a critical mindset going into this data. It goes on to say that the NCRC study found that for the Milwaukee metropolitan statistical area, whites represent 70% of the population, but receive 81% of the mortgage loans. African Americans, on the other hand, make up 16% of the area's population, but only received 4% of the mortgages. Okay. Does that tell you that there is discrimination based on race? Well, in order for us to figure that out, I think that the first step needs to be, what are the first steps in trying to get a loan? Because none of these things are covered by this particular study. All of the things that would actually give you useful information about whether or not there is race-based discrimination relating to mortgages and underwriting, none of the things that would actually tell you about that are in this study. They simply take the blanket, this is the makeup racially of this neighborhood, and they get less loans. Okay. Maybe that's a good starting point to start getting more information, but I'm not convinced that simply by virtue of their skin color, that is why they are not getting a loan. Because here's the deal. Nobody asks you what color you are when you apply for a loan. In the world we live in today, you don't even need for someone to see what your race is when you first apply for a loan. I've applied for 4 loans in the last 6 months. In none of those interactions, and I've done it with online providers and I've done it with live providers, in none of those circumstances did any of those people discover what color I am. Not one. 0. It was either all handled online. I called someone, they asked me for information, so I provided it. It was it was online, and I uploaded data to them. So let's be really clear about that. For a vast majority of people, that's not something that has to happen. They're even, quote unquote, accidentally revealing what race you are by showing up in person is not something that has to happen in order for you to get a mortgage. Now, you could argue that in these particular neighborhoods, because maybe the average home income and all these other types of things are so low that these folks may not have computers, so they can't do that, or they may be less savvy about realizing they can do this process over the phone. Well, those would be things to find out, right? The data I want from this is not 70% of the white people, 20% of the black people, X number of Hispanic. I don't care about those numbers. Those numbers tell me nothing about the problem. It tells me that there's a problem. It tells me that it doesn't tell me necessarily that there's a problem. Because remember, we need to understand the idea that it doesn't necessarily equal problem. At least not in terms of things that we need to jump out and start thinking we need to remedy. The first step needs to be, if person X earns $50,000 a year, has X amount of debt, has X amount of credit rating and whatever, and they get a loan, and then person Y comes along, has the identical numbers, but happens to be a different race and doesn't get the loan, okay, then I have questions. But see, none of this is answered in this research. In fact, the closest they come is by talking about income. And I find that interesting. I find it interesting that they'll say that there's a disparity between these two folks, that they're comparing a white person and a black person, I'm assuming, that one makes X amount of dollars and one makes the same amount of money, and one person got the loan and the other person didn't. Interesting that they brought that up, isn't it? But isn't it also interesting that while they went to the trouble to find out how much that person made, they didn't go to the trouble of telling you, well, what were the credit ratings between those two folks? What was the credit history? Right? Because I'm guessing if they actually got into that, you would discover that it's not equal. That if you took a white person with that same credit history that black person who got denied the loan or for whatever reason didn't get a loan, I bet you'd find the exact same thing would happen. Because here's the deal. Folks who underwrite loans are prejudiced towards only one color, and that's green. I know, it's a shock. And sadly, I'm not talking about folks from outer space. I am talking about the money. If someone comes through their door or calls them on the phone or contacts them online and says, I want to make a loan, they are going to give it to you if the numbers work. End of story. Even if we are going to buy into this idea that prejudice plays a part in this, if you try more than one lender in terms of contacting about getting a loan, I would say that the odds of you being a victim of discrimination drop almost to zero. Now, qualify that by saying you will be discriminated against, but it will not be because of your color. It will because your credit rating was 540 or 410 or 470. It'll be because you haven't been making your car payments on time and you're behind. It'll be because you don't have enough income, or you've acquired too much credit card debt along with what income you have, so your actual income at the end of the month is too low. That is what will prevent you from borrowing money. End of story. Even if we buy into the idea that 25% of lenders are prejudiced against black people or Hispanics or whoever, just by going to more than one lender to get potentially approved, you still go to 4. You have now reduced nearly to zero the odds that you won't get a loan from one of those people. Of course, it's ridiculous to assume that 25% of lenders would do that, because everything now is so digitized. Discovering this kind of treatment of borrowers is so ridiculously easy to discover, because eventually your race apparently does get put into this, right? Apparently late into the process, they ask this question, what race are you? So the data is absolutely there to sniff out this kind of stuff. And just tell me, pause for a moment. Can you imagine any institution or any politician or anybody in any of these organizations that monitor lending, can you imagine them giving up the media win of being a champion for folks who are underrepresented in lending by not pursuing to the fullest extent of the law anyone who did this intentionally or did it? So am I saying it doesn't happen at all? No. Am I saying that the number of times it happens is statistically insignificant? Yes, I am. I'm also saying that if you are someone who suspects that you're not getting your loan because someone is prejudiced against you based on your race, try another lender. Because the odds of you getting 2 in a row are so low that maybe if that second person turns you down, you need to take them seriously in terms of why they're telling you you don't qualify for that loan. And you know what? Here's the other part. Anyone out there who is shopping for a loan and gets turned down for a loan should get a straight answer as to why. When I went to get, I think it was when I was going to do a refi on my house, they balked at giving me my refi because I had a thing on my credit history. I had had a surgery back in 2005. And then I'd been out of the country, and it had all been paid for. But there was somehow in some accounting thing, there was like a $4.50 part of this medical thing that someone said didn't get paid. So that ended up on my credit. And that was a problem, and I had to get that explained, and I had to take care of it, only to discover it actually had been paid, and I could show someone the canceled check for $4 and whatever cents. But in any event, regardless of my color, that had an effect on my credit. So what I'm appealing to here is your ability to take a look at numbers like this and ask what questions are actually being answered by the statistics these people are trying to use to convince you of something. And I get, man, do I get that we live in a politically charged environment where this topic is used to rile folks up. It's used to garner approval for questionable policies or policies maybe that you love and think are fantastic, and to try and consolidate power around in order to achieve perhaps other political goals. But let's try and weed right through all of this stuff. It goes on to make statements of in a similar vein, right? We were talking about Milwaukee. In the St. Louis area, white residents make up 75% of the population but received 83% of the mortgage loans. Conversely, African-American residents are 18% of the population and received only 4%, which is very similar to the same numbers that they were seeing in Milwaukee. And then this NCRC president CEO, John Taylor, says, quote, "This report clearly shows the lack of mortgage lending in low and moderate income neighborhoods and predominantly minority neighborhoods. But is the fact that there's a lack of mortgage lending, this is me talking now, but is the fact that there's a lack of mortgage lending in those low and moderate income neighborhoods, we're going to go back to that in a second, is that because they're black? I say no. I say the thing that starts first, the first thing that feeds into this is the first line he said, low and moderate income neighborhoods. When it comes to lending, I think I can just say, well, there's your problem. Low and moderate income. That means you're only going to qualify for a certain amount, which may or may not facilitate you purchasing a house. So is the solution to this, and this is the part that really pisses me off, because I've seen this happen. You get these folks going out there claiming, oh, we really need to do the social justice thing and give these folks the money they need to purchase a home. And you saddle them with more debt than they can handle given their income level. You are not doing anyone a favor by doing that. You are condemning them to a potentially catastrophic financial event that could screw them for the rest of their lives. Shame on you. Shame on you for using these people as some sort of a political pawn who you're willing to sacrifice at some bizarre political altar because you've got some sort of thing you got going on with your own political desires. Because that's not what these folks need. Better jobs or an ability to qualify for better jobs might be an answer I'd put out there. How about better money management skills. How about if in high school, instead of teaching some of these other things, we put in there personal money management? There's a lot of things you can get into, but none of this that these bozos are talking about solve the problem. You want to give a lot of these folks more of something that they haven't learned how to manage effectively, or that they don't earn enough of to service the debt you're about to saddle them with if things go wrong if in that marketplace. And today, do any of you feel confident enough that we should be okay with saddling people with a level of debt that they might not be able to handle if the market turns? Now, I've made clear on this show what I think is coming. In that I am not 100% optimistic that everything's just going to keep shooting right on up. So I don't think you're doing anyone a favor saddling them with this kind of debt. I'm going to go ahead and take a quick break. Energy levels are rising. And I'll be right back after this. Are you ready to jump in and start your search for your first investment property? Maybe you've decided that it's time to own your own home, or maybe you're ready to sell your home and move on to something new. No matter what your goal is, the Rebel Broker can help. That's right, aside from hosting this show, I am also the owner-broker of Whitelaw & Sons Real Estate Services right here in Silicon Valley. With over 25 years experience serving Silicon Valley, Morgan Hill, San Martin, and Gilroy, I or one of my great agents can help you achieve your goals in real estate. So if you're ready to look into taking that next step towards achieving your real estate goals, point your browser at www.soldbyrobert.com. That's www.soldbyrobert.com and get in touch. Let me show you how I will earn your business and your respect. Again, that's www.soldbyrobert.com, or you can call me at 408-852-0525. California Bureau of Real Estate ID 00984-909. Welcome back. We're talking about race and lending. And it's one of those things where it would be suicide for a business involved in lending to practice this as a thing. And I have yet to see a study that shows it in any statistically significant way that folks with identical credit profiles, income, all that other kind of wonderful stuff, that if all you do is change the race, suddenly the black guy doesn't get the loan and the white guy does. I have come across examples of where folks have tried to do that. You know that thing that I can't remember the name of the guy. Sort of he's this sort of ambush well, no, I guess you can't call him ambush. He plays a part, I guess, and goes into like abortion clinics and gets video of whatever he gets videos of in terms of the parts and stuff like that, other gross things. And I guess there have been folks who've tried to do this, who've gone out and submitted loan documents that are identical in terms of all of the numbers, with the only difference being one applicant is black and one applicant is being white. And I have yet to see an example of that then following up with an indication that race had anything to do with anything. Now, I'm happy to entertain the possibility this goes on. In fact, I'm happy to entertain the possibility of darn near anything going on. All you have to do is surf the internet for 5 minutes to discover that the craziest stuff you could possibly imagine still goes on. There are absolutely Looney Tunes out there who think that people who aren't the same color as them shouldn't be treated as people, or they deserve to be ignored, or whatever. So there's a lot of stupid. The stupid is out there. I absolutely get that. But I got a couple of things to say about stupid. First thing, stupid always finds a way, no matter what you're doing. But in something like lending, someone who embraces this kind of a mindset and thinks this is the way to run their lending business is going to have a few problems. One, they're going to get caught. It's going to become very obvious what they're doing. They're going to get caught. They're going to cost their company tons of money, and there's a very good chance they're going to spend some high-quality time in jail. And every once in a while, I'm sure we catch someone who, for whatever reason, decides they don't want to loan to black people or Hispanic people or Asian people, and it wouldn't surprise me if you had a predominantly a black organization of lending that didn't want to lend to white people for whatever reason, maybe even feeling that they were doing a service by not servicing white people. Because in my opinion, stupid is an equal opportunity genetic defect. It happens everywhere. You're going to get just as many percentage of populations of all the various races that are stupid. And again, stupid just ultimately reveals itself. And in today's world, at least in the world I think we live in, and again, maybe I'm totally wrong. I've lived in a few places across the country. I've been to a few places across the country. I just don't see in this being something that is happening as an institutional decision. I don't see any business doing this. I could see an individual, a misguided moron who's managed to get into the job somehow doing something like this, but getting caught relatively quickly if this is something that's happening to them, if this is something they're actually finding an opportunity to do on a regular basis. Now, this report goes on, and I actually encourage you to read this thing. I'll be honest. It was ridiculously painful to read the original document. If you want to read the full NCRC study, please do. Frankly, there's nothing there that's going to take you beyond what we're really talking about here. But it just pushes this idea that I think hurts the people they're claiming to want to help more than it helps them. And I think back to folks who I talked to when the bubble burst, who just couldn't do it. They were in the worst position possible. They had done a 100% loan, 110% loan, or a stated income loan. They had done all these various things. Folks who never would have qualified based on their actual merit to borrow, regardless of their color. I had white people, I had Asian people, I had Hispanics. I had everybody under the rainbow was represented who was hurt by the policy of, gosh, these folks really need it, so let's give it to them. It's like giving that 16-year-old who's very passionate about driving enough money to go ahead and buy that Porsche, right up until he wraps it around a tree. Skills need to be learned for some folks relating to their finances, regardless of color. So I actually find this kind of stuff just severely annoying. Quote, just reading it makes my head hurt. Quote, without access to responsible mortgage credit and the opportunity to become a homeowner, the ability of working people to build wealth is severely curtailed. Until our financial institutions make a full and genuine commitment that creditworthy borrowers, regardless of their skin color, will be able to access responsible credit, the economies in these neighborhoods will continue to deteriorate. So where do you start with that? Access to responsible mortgage credit. Well, responsible mortgage credit isn't based on the color of your skin. It's based on your credit rating, how much you make, how much you spend, and how you've serviced your loans in the past. It's that simple. If what they're trying to imply is going on is actually going on, people will go to jail. This is not something we discover in some report from this kind of an organization and then clutch the pearls and exclaim, oh my gosh, how has this gone on for so long? Because it hasn't. It hasn't been going on for so long. What we have are folks who are suffering from other problems that manifest themselves in an inability to borrow for reasons that have nothing to do with what color they are. Now, we can obviously make a step back. We can actually step in. Well, you know what it is? The fact that they don't have these opportunities to earn more income, the fact that they've been raised in an environment where they find it difficult to get additional training. I get all that. And all of that could be absolutely accurate. And I'm not going to even argue that one. But my point is the solution to this problem is not to then just say, well, we're going to overlook all these problems with your credit history and we're just going to loan you money. That is not the solution to the problem. The solution to the problem is to solve the problem, which is what we just discussed. We need folks who have access to an ability to improve their skill sets so that they can get higher earning jobs. We need folks who are better able to manage the income they do earn and understand budgeting. And I don't care what color you are. I don't care if you're on the poor side of town or the middle side of town or the white side of town where people who are white but don't make as much money live. The way that they paint this, it's all the people with money are white and live on this end of town, and all the people without money are black and live on this end of town. I got to think there's got to be some kind of blend in the middle of town somewhere, right? There's got to be plenty of white folks who have no money and plenty of black folks who have more money. That's got to happen, right? It just seems like a statistical thing that would happen. But in any event, his entire quote's got problems for me. So first, mortgage credit and the opportunity to become a homeowner. Absolutely, totally based on the numbers. And I'm totally up for that. The ability for working people to build wealth is severely curtailed. Well, no. The only way you're going to severely curtail these people's ability to build wealth is to saddle them with debt that they cannot manage if things take a downturn. Because at the same time these folks are going to be saying we should loan these folks money, they're going to be talking about those 1% loans and those 3% loans and those 0% loans that we've already talked about on this show that are A, going to feed the problem, and B, put these folks in a position so tenuous that if the market turns around by even 3, 4, 5 percentage points downward, they are now upside down on their loan and they are screwed and they owe more than the home is worth. That is not doing any of these folks a favor, regardless of their color. I don't care what color they are. You're not helping people by saddling them with this kind of debt. And it frustrates the hell out of me that no one takes the long view. It almost feels like some of these folks do this because it makes them feel good. You know, I feel really good that I'm facilitating you purchasing this house. I don't want to think too far ahead. I don't want to actually assume that bad things might happen in the market and all of this money you owe might turn into a huge weight around your neck that keeps you below the surface of the water so you can no longer financially breathe and you're forced to suffer with the consequences for decades. I don't want to think about that part of it. I just want to think about how warm and fuzzy I feel because I've managed to do something. Wow, sorry. I went a little off on that one. Or even worse, somehow these are folks who are manipulating this into some sort of a political wedge that they can use one way or the other. Utterly frustrating to me. And then he, as I mentioned before, he went on to say, until our financial institutions make a full and genuine commitment that creditworthy borrowers, critical statement, creditworthy borrowers, because I want you to show me the creditworthy borrowers in these areas that you claim are underrepresented that are not getting a loan. I want to see them. The fact that they can't show me any of that tells me that they're having trouble finding them. And I'll tell you what, just get a kiosk at the local library with a computer and have it always sitting at Quicken Loans. And pay for someone at the library to sit right there with folks and walk them through the process to apply for a loan online. For the folks that are actually creditworthy, they will get a loan. Guaranteed. But that's not what they're really talking about. They throw that term around like that's what they mean, but it sure as heck isn't. Because credit, and he goes on to say, regardless of their skin color, if anyone's not getting a loan because of the color of their skin, whoever makes that decision, makes that call, pushes that paperwork, is breaking the law and will go to jail. So stop telling me this in some sort of a statistical manipulation of data to try and make a point for you to get a political thing passed so that you can see more money flow into this to folks who are going to be burdened by it. Actually show me the folks where this is being done to, and let's get some folks put in jail over this. And then he goes on to reference being able to have access to responsible credit. They're not talking about responsible credit here. Yeah. Let's see. In both metro areas, the population is hyper-segregated, with the majority of the area's white population concentrated together and separate from the minority population. I don't know if they're also talking about like redlining here. I'm not sure if they're implying that's happening. They don't say it, and if they didn't say it, there must be absolutely no credit to it. But anyway, they go on to say, quote, in the city of St. Louis itself, the racial composition of the neighborhood is a strong predictor of mortgage activity, becoming nearly as important as neighborhood income in its predictive capability. Okay, becoming nearly as important as income? So I just can't help but think that this is a load of crap. Instead of having the first question be what color are you, and the next question being what's your household income, wouldn't it make a whole lot more sense to ask questions that a lender would ask? How much is your income? How much is your debt? Do you know what your credit rating is? Wouldn't that make more sense? It seems like it would to me. They go on to say this guy's annoys me. Anyway, this lack of lending is not fully explained by differences of income. That's right, because guess what? Income is not the only thing that determines your credit worthiness, meaning that credit is flowing more to neighborhoods with higher percentages of white residents with the same income profile. Okay. Do you mean, and they don't tell you what their income profile is. Their income profile seems to simply be income. And as we just mentioned, income ain't it. It's not just how much you make, it's how well you've serviced your past debt via your credit rating, which we're already screwing with. Remember, we had a show last week and a week before. They're already screwing with how your credit rating gets calculated to make it easier to get a higher score by including elements that have nothing to do with actual credit. Things like your power bill, your electricity bill. That's not a loan, by the way. Absolutely nothing to do with credit. How that should count towards your credit worthiness, I don't know. Because here's what happens when you don't pay your power bill. The lights turn off. The power company is never out more than a few bucks at any given moment, depending on whether or not you've paid your bill. Water bill, same thing. Phone bill, same thing. So how these things are going to be used to boost your credit rating is a little bit of an anomaly for me. I have a sneaking suspicion that if this gentleman was being completely honest, he would go on to say, after explaining that income differences does not fully explain it, he might go on to say, yeah, but, and if we bothered to ask about credit ratings and debt to income ratios and other things, then it would probably explain it completely. But no, we want to ignore the actual core problem here. We want to blame this on what color someone is. Let's see. There are several other groups sort of jumping on the bandwagon here. One of them is the Metropolitan Milwaukee Fair Housing Council and the St. Louis Equal Housing and Community Reinvestment Alliance. And this is just one small snapshot. This is obviously two specific locations that are being discussed here. And this is a common thing that gets brought up every now and then. And the way the lending system works, lending is the most regulated thing on the planet. So if you don't get a loan, odds are it's going to be real clear why. If it's not, ask the question. What was the problem? What was it on my credit report that was a problem? It really is that simple. And I know that for some folks, they need to feed that angst, that somehow it's somebody who wants to stop you from achieving your goals because of what color you are. And do people like that exist in the world? Sure, they do. All kinds of people exist in the world. But again, that's just one more good reason to go to more than one potential lender if you're concerned about that possibly happening. But don't and if you are someone in this position, this will be my final point here. And I've already kind of gone on this tirade, but dear Lord, please don't saddle yourself with something that you can't handle down the road. I'm all for calculated risks. That's kind of what we do here, is try to come up with ideas for you to get the best knowledge possible. And when it's not the best knowledge, maybe it's some translational overview data that just helps to firm up data you've already got in your head. Whether we're talking about states where it's the cheapest to own real estate, or we're talking about where people are making the most per dollar they spend on real estate in terms of investing, right? All of that stuff represents a certain amount of risk. But please, those of you out there who live in minority communities, who are seeing folks coming around waving flags and toting signs saying they want to get you your money for borrowing something, please look at the numbers. Understand how much debt you're assuming. Don't let any of these people sell you on a loan with little or no money down and have them be willing to say, okay, let's do it, without you fully understanding how much debt you're taking on, how much that's going to cost you per month, what it's going to do to your cash flow situation. Don't assume that house is going to be worth anything more than what you bought it for. Really understand what they're selling you, because I do not ever want to go through another 3, 4, 5 year period of time like I did from 2007 to 2011, where folks are wrestling with this ridiculous debt that they never should have had in the first place. And if there had been actual standards in place, if folks had not sort of gone the subprime lending route and said, well, despite the fact these folks don't have the numbers, we really want to make it possible for them to own a home. You know what? I want to help you make it possible to make it possible for you to own a home too. But I don't want it to do it by saddling you with crazy debt or making you dependent on me in some way. I want to give you the knowledge you need to make more money, to do better things with the money you are making, to responsibly service the debt that you willingly took on. That's the better way, because that's the path that takes you towards being so financially together that in 10 years, you are 10 years better off. You have reaped the rewards of what you've learned and what you've worked for, and you can look back over those 10 years and say, this was good. I did a smart thing. I didn't take on more debt than I could take care of. I managed my money well, and I am way better off today than I was 10 years ago. You don't want to be one of those poor folks that I dealt with and tried to convince some of them not to take the loans that they took in 2004 and 2005, who over the course of the last 10 years, when they look back, they would love to be back before they bought that property at the peak and ended up having to walk away from it after everything fell apart. And having them deal with foreclosure and having them taking their children out of their bedrooms because they couldn't afford to stay in their houses anymore. Nobody was done any favors by that kind of lending. And I don't want that for anyone else. And the bottom line is you need to own that. You need to own the process that makes you the greatest risk in town in terms of borrowing money. It really is up to you. Don't let anyone else tell you they need to step in and make it happen for you. It really does come down to you. And I get very emotional about this one because maybe my mind is just completely wired differently than a lot of other folks on this one. But I honestly don't think this is doing a good thing for anybody. All this does is really push this subprime thing. It pushes banks to be able to make money off of doing loans. It pushes this idea that we then create these loans and sell them back to the federal government, and then the federal government is taking care of the risk. And then if bad things do happen, it's taxpayers on the hook. So it's a double whammy. You get screwed, and the taxpayers, all the other folks out here who have to contribute money to that, get screwed as well. And the only folks who come out on top are the banks who originated the loans. And it makes my head just hurt that a lot of folks don't think along the lines of what's going to happen if things don't continue growing at infinity for the rest of time. All right, folks. This is the show. Whenever I have this one, I always get calls. I always get emails and messages. I honestly am interested in having a calm, thoughtful discussion about folks on this when relating to this when folks disagree with me. I like to think I've got a fairly well thought out position on this, and if you disagree, please feel free to reach out via email at the website www.therebelbroker.com. Click on Contact the Rebel Broker. Send me a message. I'd be happy to hear what you've got to say on the subject. But I tell you, you end up just sort of becoming a tool in something where once it's done and once you've gotten the money, no one really cares what happens to you. But if everything takes a dump, you're left holding the bag, and that stinks. Anyway, thanks for listening, everybody. I truly appreciate that you make these goofy daily rants of mine part of your daily experience. Numbers have started to really shoot through the roof over the last few days, and I know that's just because of the audience going out there and making it happen for me. So thank you very much. Thanks for listening. I will talk to you all next time. Have a good one.